Okay, so let's pick up where we left off last time. So last time we talked about sort of the three assumptions of people that were self-interested, rational, and capable but fallible. And today I want to talk about sort of the evolution of society. Okay, we're going to talk about what characteristics a successful society has, and and by extension or by implication, the characteristics that not successful societies don't have. Okay, and so the basic one, the basic idea, is that we can summarize all of these things up in what Peter Bettke calls the three P's and the three I's. So societies that have the three P's will get the three I's. Okay, so let's go through these just sort of one by one. And the first one are what we call property rights. Okay, so property rights are some notion of what's mine and what's yours. Okay, so this is my watch, all right? This is my pen. Here's my Sharpie marker, and if I were to keep going, I have my cell phone here, right? I have a tape dispenser that Ferris has generously given me, right? These are all things that are mine, okay? And if you look around, where you're sitting, or if you think about the things that are in your room or in your car, for example, those are all your things, okay? And what property rights allow us to do is basically say, I am allowed to use this thing, and you are not, okay? So you cannot use my pen without my permission. Right now, granted, as it turns out, I have a couple of pens over there on my desk that are ready for anyone to use for any purpose. So perhaps not the best of examples. Think about my car, right? So here's the key to my car. I have a Volkswagen, right? You can't operate my car unless I give you the key. That's true, right? And you can't use my car unless I let you. Okay? Unless I say you are allowed to drive my car, you don't get to drive my car. Okay? And the same thing with your stuff. I can't wear your clothes without your permission, and I probably don't want to. No offense, but I'm a little bigger than you guys are, so we'll just let that one go. You can't wear mine either, right? You can't play with my computer without my permission, right? And that's sort of the idea here. Okay, and so property rights lead to incentives. Now, what are incentives, right? Incentives are anything that induces you to do something. Like, what is your they're sort of the guiding light that tells you what to do and when to do it. Okay, and so how do property rights lead to incentives, right? Well, let's think about a world where there are no property rights. Okay, we've actually seen these plenty of times. The most common example are forests or fishing. So think about the ocean, actually, right? We have lots of species of fish that are almost extinct because we've overfished them. Okay, economists refer to this as the tragedy of the commons. Right? When commons refers to a world where there are no property rights governing access or use to that resource. And the tendency is for that resource to be overutilized. Okay, so in the case of forests, if nobody owns the forest, what should we expect to see? Should we expect to see a forest that is growing and thriving and full of very tall trees, or should we expect to see a logging company has clear-cut the entire forest and not bothered to replant any trees? Okay, and so what we typically see are the logging companies just cutting all the trees down and not bothering to replant any, right? And why would they? If you think about it from sort of a self-interested, rational, and capable but fallible perspective, right? So if I plant a tree and I'm not allowed to protect that tree and let it grow up as tall as I would like it to grow before cutting it down, well, why would I bother planting the tree? I know that if I plant the tree, you can cut it down, right? And if you cut it down, well, I'm going through all the effort of planting the tree without getting any benefit whatsoever. And so if the benefit is zero and the cost is positive, we're not going to do it, okay? And so the tragedy of the commons comes in basically because individual people will have a very strong incentive to basically go out and grab as much of the resource as they possibly can as fast as they can. So the reason why fish, or some species of fish, are going extinct. Why? Well, because they're valuable and nobody owns them. And so no one has any incentive to take care of them, right? Let's think back to the tree example. If I'm allowed to plant the tree and then let it grow, and which entails stopping you from cutting it down, right? So if I can say, no, you are not allowed to cut this tree down, it's mine, right? Then I have a very strong incentive to plant the tree because I'm the one that's going to get it in the end. Okay, and so the property rights idea is the idea that by giving me the ability to stop you, I will have the incentive to both replant the trees and also to let them grow to the optimal height. Okay, so I give the example in the notes of Christmas trees, right? The only reason why Christmas trees can exist is because the Christmas tree farmers are able to stop people from coming on their property and chopping them down in August, let's say, and using them for firewood. Okay. So property rights lead to the incentives, and by incentives I mean the incentive to properly take care of scarce resources. Okay, so there's only so much stuff in the world. Given that, we want people to take care of it. Okay, and the incentive, the property rights, and the incentives that property rights give is to take care of those resources. When you own something, you take much better care of it. Classic example, think about Ferris's parking lot after a football game. Is it clean or is it messy? Right? It's pretty messy. Turns out you guys are slobs. Okay? And you throw your trash on the floor and you do all kinds of stuff, right? Why do you do that? Well, because someone else will clean it up for you, right? But your front lawn at your house is probably pretty clean. Why? Well, you own it, right? You have a property right to your front lawn, which gives you an incentive to take care of it, okay? The second P is what we call prices, and prices lead to information, okay? And so what we're talking about here is the price mechanism itself. The price mechanism is basically this idea that prices are freely changing in an open society. Okay? And those prices tell us things. Specifically, they tell us about the relative scarcities of different goods. Okay? And so think about that. So a low price means that the good is relatively abundant, there's lots of it available, and it's not exactly difficult to come by another unit of that good. And a high price tells us that it is difficult to come by another unit of this good. Okay? And what I'm sort of talking about is sort of this concept that we call marginalism. Marginalism meaning the next unit. Right, so we're always thinking about the next unit. Okay, and so think about sort of a classic conundrum in economics, which was the water diamond paradox. Okay, this puzzled economists for a very long time. And briefly, the water diamond paradox is this idea that water, a substance which is essential to life, sustains life, and is ultimately very important to our everyday existence, is very, very cheap. But diamonds, which are largely superfluous, right? So today there's lots of commercial activities, but when the water diamond paradox was around, diamonds were just shiny gemstones. There really wasn't much else that you could do with a diamond other than look at it, right? Today we use diamonds for all kinds of things, so there's a little bit It's a little bit different now, but just think about water, an essential thing for life, diamonds, sparkly rock, right? And the paradox comes in when we see that water is so incredibly cheap, but diamonds are so expensive. And so why would that ever be? Why would water, which is so valuable to life, be so inexpensive, and diamonds which are not essential to life, be so expensive? Okay, and the answer lies in marginalism. So think about how difficult it is for you to go out and get, let's say, a glass of water. So if I gave you homework this week and said, your homework is to bring me 1 gallon of water, right? It'd be mildly annoying, but you could do it, right? You'd be like, okay, like the biggest expense to you would probably be finding an empty gallon jug, right? And just going to your tap and sitting there and filling it up, right? That'd be the most annoying part of the exercise. Okay, you could do it. It'd be annoying. I'm not denying that, but you could get me a gallon of water. Okay, but if I instead, what if I said, bring me a gallon of diamonds? Right. Well, all of a sudden, this homework assignment just became very difficult. Right. It'd be incredibly difficult to find an entire gallon of diamonds. That gallon, by the way, would weigh something like 40.6 pounds. Right. So it'd be a very heavy 1 gallon jug full of diamonds. And if you can find a gallon of diamonds, I would love it. You can feel free to drop it off anytime, but I don't suspect that I'm going to be getting a gallon of diamonds anytime soon. Okay. Now, why is that? Why is it so easy to get water? Well, because water is everywhere, right? You could go to your tap and get some water, right? If the tap was broken, what could you do? Well, you could walk to campus and go use a drinking fountain. If the drinking fountains were broken, what could you do, right? There's probably a hose somewhere on campus, so go get water from there. If that didn't work, what could you do? You could go to the rock and get water from the soda machine, right? And you could go all the way down the line, and even if it really came to it, I'm sure you could just go in the toilet and dunk the excuse me, dunk the gallon jug in the toilet and pull up a gallon of water, and you'd be good to go, right? And so you can find water basically everywhere. Okay, but diamonds are more difficult to find, and so the cost of finding another diamond is incredibly high, right? But the cost of finding another cup of water or something is incredibly low, right? And the other thing to think about is, what are we using these resources for, right? So water, has anyone here ever been, parched? And by parched, I mean, your lips are cracking, you're suffering from actual dehydration. Like you are actually suffering from a medical condition that requires you to go to the hospital. If you have, I obviously, my condolences to you. I feel terrible, right? But most people haven't, right? We simply haven't. We've been thirsty, but we haven't been absolutely, dehydrated, okay? And so, the additional unit of water that we're getting is very low value to us, right? It's like, oh, I'm kind of thirsty. Well, I guess I'll have a glass of water, right? The other way to think about it is that water is so abundant in America. Clean water, by the way, is so common in America that we actually put it in our toilets, right? Which is itself a phenomenon of massive amounts of wealth, right? So think about, sub-Saharan Africa or places in Southeast Asia that are very poor. These places, they don't have clean water, or most people there don't have as ready access to clean water as you and I do, okay? And what they do, what they would do for a gallon of clean water is, they'd walk miles and miles and miles to go get the water, right? And in America, we're so wealthy that we fill our toilets up with it, and well, we make it not clean water, right? And so you never really forget that, right? We're so wealthy that we take perfectly clean water and ruin it, whereas 2/3 of the world does not have ready access to clean water, okay? And so what prices here are doing, to get back to the lesson, what prices here are doing is giving us information about how scarce a good is, right? And at the same time, which we'll discuss more this upcoming week, they're also telling us that the changing prices is telling us about changes in market conditions that are important, but would be entirely way too costly for us to investigate. So Friedrich Hayek gives a wonderful example in his one of his essays. I believe it's from 1937, about a tin factory. Okay, so imagine you make tin cans. So you're making tin cans, right? So, you're making beer cans, let's say. Okay, so you're making your beer cans, and you know, you're using tin, and you know, a factory in Russia or a tin mine in Russia collapses. Right? Well, what should you do? Right? You should probably use less tin because there's going to be less tin available. Right? But how many of you have ever watched the news and tried to figure out what's going on in the tin market? Right? Well, probably very few of you, right? Or think about anything that you buy. So think about like the gas market, so gasoline for your car, right? How many of you are constantly monitoring the Middle East to figure out how much gas is going to be available for you to purchase and or to use rather, and basing your decisions based on the conflicts in the Middle East or anything else that's going on in the world of oil, right? Is anyone here doing that? You know, my guess is no, right? And so how do you decide how much gas to use? Well, you look at the price, right? I think today gas is something like $2.37 a gallon in Big Rapids. And so at that price, you can use lots of gas. It's relatively cheap. A couple of years ago, gas was over $4 a gallon, right? And so what did you see there? Well, people use less gas. And why was gas so expensive? Well, lots of reasons. Hurricane Katrina, you know, knocked out a whole refinery, which made gas more expensive for a while. And so what did we do? We economized on our use of gas, right? And the high price told us that there's less gas available. And when prices fall, it tells us, it gives us the information that more gas is available, right? And so prices communicate very important information very, very quickly. Okay, and so that's sort of the point of them is the prices and the price mechanism. Its role is to tell us things, not to act as some sort of a restriction on access, right? So people talk about how, you know, high prices are discriminatory, and it's like, yeah, actually, they're supposed to be. They're telling us that that thing that everybody wants, there's not a whole lot of it, so we have to allocate it. We have to figure out how to get it, or we need to know that there's not that much available. And so what do? Well, we have a high price, right? It has nothing to do with corporate greed or anything like that. It just simply reflects the information about how much is actually available, okay? And so the price mechanism is fundamental to any society. A functioning price mechanism is extremely important. It's one of the most important things. So you can very quickly judge whether or not a society or an economy is going to be wealthy by how well its price mechanism functions. If it's functioning really well, odds are that economy is going to do very, very well. If it's functioning very poorly, odds are it's going to be a very poor society. Okay, and the last P is what we call profit. But this also includes losses, which are just negative profit. Okay, so profit, which leads to innovation. Okay, and the idea here is that we need to have some sort of a reward for good and punishment for bad. Okay, and so profits are sort of the reward for doing something good with people, with resources rather. So if you're using resources wisely and you're selling things on the open market and making money or making consumers happy, I should say, you are rewarded with financial returns, which we call profit. Okay, and if you're doing a bad job, well, you're failing to serve the consumer, right? You're failing to give him or her what he or she wants, and as a result, you should be punished, right? You're wasting time, you're wasting resources, we want to punish that, right? And so those are the losses, right? Losses are sort of a punishment for doing the wrong thing, okay? And when we say it leads to innovation here, is think about the only way to earn profit in a society, to earn more money, is to find new ways to satisfy consumers, right? The only way that you can actually make money, honestly at least, is to actually find a way to make people's lives better. And the way to do that is to either try to increase the benefit that someone is getting for the same number of dollars, so increase sort of the bang for your buck, right? Or to find a way to lower the cost of something that's already existing, so to get the same amount of bang for fewer bucks, right? And so those are the ways that you can sort of beat your competitors, to outsell your neighbor, right? Or other people in your industry, is to either make a better product for the same price, or make the same price, or the same product for a lower price, right? Those are the two ways to do it. And the allure of profit spurs on this innovation, right? The only way to earn the profit is to find some new way of solving either a new problem or an old problem, right? And the losses here will also tell you whether or not your innovation was a good idea, okay? And so both of these are important in a functioning society, profit and loss. If you have one and not the other, you've got a hobbled system, okay? So now, imagine if we went to Vegas again. So we're in the Vegas world of back here, okay? And what I do is I say, okay, look, you're going to bet with your own money. You can keep all the winnings. So anything you win is yours. And I tell you what, if you lose money, just come to me and I will give you the amount of money that you lost back. So I will cover all of your losses, right? Well, what are you going to do? Are you ever going to stop gambling? Of course not, right? Unless you just get bored or physically weak, right, from not eating or not sleeping. But until then, you're just going to keep gambling, right? So if I remove the sting of losses and make it so the only thing you can feel is profit, well, you're going to continue to do bad behavior, right? You're going to continue doing things that are not exactly conducive to long-run growth, okay? And at the same time, if I put a limit on how much money you can earn, right? So if I say, well, you graduated from college, that's great, but we don't want you to be too wealthy. So we're going to pass a law that says, you can only make 5% more per year than you would if you just than you did at the age of 18, right? Well, how many of you are going to bother going to college, right? If I've reduced the amount of profit that you're going to get from coming to college, then you're probably going to do less of it, right? So if I remove losses, people do more. If I remove profit, people do less. And the important thing is that doing more of this, when I remove the losses, people will do more of the bad behavior, or they'll do too much of a good thing, right? And by doing too much of a good thing, they're actually still behaving inefficiently, which we'll come to next week, okay? And if I remove the profit, they're going to do too little of a good thing, right? Which is also inefficient, okay? And so this sort of idea here, right, that people are self-interested, rational, and capable but fallible, and the 3 P's of property rights, prices, and profit and losses, and the 3 I's, incentives, information, and innovation. These are key, basically, to society, okay? And so next week, what we'll get into is sort of the supply and demand framework.